President Trump vows to take his D.C. crime crackdown national, setting up a showdown with Democratic mayors and governors across the country. Today, 2 weeks after federalizing D.C.'s police force and deploying the National Guard to the nation's capital, the president signed several new executive orders aimed at exerting further federal control over D.C.'s justice system and directing the defense secretary to establish, quote, specialized units in the National Guard to be ready to be deployed to address crime in other cities like Chicago, which the president seemed focused on as his next target, slamming the state's Democratic Governor JB Pritzker and chastising him for not welcoming the idea of federal deployments in the city.
I hate to barge in on a city and then be treated horribly by corrupt politicians and bad politicians like a guy like Pritzker. I don't like going to a town, a city, place, a state, and then be criticized by some corrupt or incompetent governor where crime is rampant. When I have some slob like Pritzker criticizing us before we even go there, I made the statement that next should be Chicago, because as you all know, Chicago's a killing field right now. And they don't acknowledge it. And they say, we don't need him, freedom, freedom. He's a dictator, he's a dictator. A lot of people are saying maybe we like a dictator. I don't like a dictator. I'm not a dictator. I'm a man with great common sense, and I'm a smart person. And when I see what's happening to our cities, and then you send in troops, instead of being praised, they're saying you're trying to take over the republic.
And the president also saying that he's not ruling out military deployments to Chicago.
Are you prepared to order National Guard troops, though, into American cities if those governors don't request the federal deployment?
I am, but I also think that, look, Chicago, everybody knows how bad it is. Everybody standing there knows. We know. You don't have to be doing any studies. They should be saying, please come in.
We're expecting to hear from Governor Pritzker any moment on those threats. Speaking with NBC's Shaquille Brewster this weekend, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson saying the Guard isn't needed in his city.
This is not the role of our military. The brave men and women who signed up to serve our country did not sign up to occupy American cities. It's the antithesis to our democracy. Not only is it the antithesis to our democracy, and it's not what individuals signed up to do, it's costly, it's illegal, it's unconstitutional.
All of it comes as the president has sought to paint a picture of America's largest Democratic-run cities as crime-infested and attack Democrats as weak and dangerous. While many officials and residents will acknowledge that crime in major cities remains a big issue, authorities have reported significant drops in crime rates at both the national and local level, including in these cities that President Trump is targeting. In Washington, for instance, violent crime here has fallen 27% compared to this time last year, with homicides down 15%. In Chicago, crime is down 13% overall, with a 31% drop in murder. Joining me now to discuss all of this, NBC's senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake and NBC intelligence reporter Dan Luce. Also with me is NBC's Shaquille Brewster, who's fresh off an interview with Illinois Governor Pritzker. So, Garrett, let's start with you. The executive orders today signed focused mostly on D.C.'s cash bail system and the ongoing federalization of the city. D.C.'s cash bail system, though, this isn't new. Why is he focusing on it now?
Well, I think the White House is realizing that despite what they are saying publicly, that they can't arrest their way out of any kind of crime problem that may exist in Washington, D.C. They also have to address other elements of the system. Now, the president complained about D.C.'s cash bail or no cash bail system back during his first term when it was actually much looser. The district has tightened up some of the requirements around its system in the intervening years, but nevertheless, this has been something on the president's mind for some time. And I think they're realizing if they can't keep the people that they are arresting, in some cases for quite minor infractions, behind bars longer, their numbers might not hold up, or at least you'd have higher arrests with lower sort of actual effect on crime. So I think both of those things are probably behind it, this longstanding antipathy by the president and a realization that arrests alone are not a metric for success in terms of actually getting rid of crime in a major metropolitan area.
But at the same time, Garrett, he's claiming the city is now safe, kind of bragging about the difference from just about 11 days or so since he had pushed troops into Washington. How does he square that with the fact that he feels the need for these executive orders?
Ryan, you and most of our colleagues have heard me say the phrase, don't try to make it make sense. Sometimes these policies can't be combined together in a way that totally build on themselves. But I think what you see here is, again, a president who's trying to approach this from a variety of different angles. They saw some of the criticism from the very beginning that this idea of just suppressing crime wouldn't really be defeating crime, that they had to make some of these more wholesale changes. There's also been conversations about, what kind of crimes in D.C. go through which parts of the court system here, which is unique in the country in the sense that all of it is federal, but some of it is sort of local federal and some of it is capital F federal. I mean, I know this is all kind of wonky stuff, but the D.C. system is so unique, and I think now that they've become involved in it, they have to become very involved in it to get the results they want to see across the board.
And he focused a lot on Chicago today, but he's also in a bit of an internet spat with the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, kind of threatening that Baltimore could be next. Maybe he even pulls the funding for the Key Bridge recovery project. Is this a multi-pronged deployment of guard troops across the country that we could see happening?
Well, we'll see, Ryan. I mean, I was told today by a senior White House official that it's a question of when, not if, they try to involve themselves in the crime situation in Chicago. That seems to be a higher priority than what's going on in Baltimore. The president's answer when he was asked about those comments about Wes Moore and the bridge collapse today went on an incredibly long tangent about police officers stopping people from crossing the bridge and people who were eating their lunch on the bridge when it collapsed. I mean, he did not seem fully prepared to wade into the idea of engaging in Baltimore, in neighboring Maryland, in as significant of a way. But I think it is telling that both of the governors that we're dealing with here are people who are, I think, widely considered to be exploring presidential bids in 2028, and the president running interference to a certain degree for whoever the Republican nominee ends up being next cycle by trying to take some of the shine off both of those figures.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Garrett. Let's talk now about the practical impact of all of this. Dan Luce will bring you in. One of the executive orders the president talked about today directs the Secretary of Defense to create specialized D.C. Guard units that can be deputized to enforce federal law. Does this signal a potential change in mission from what we traditionally think of with the Guard?
Ryan, absolutely. This is really extraordinary and unprecedented. The National Guard is not trained as a seasoned law enforcement force, right? And so its role is to help support local authorities in natural disasters. Occasionally, when there have been riots, they are brought in to help back up police. But this kind of special deputized unit, it's very unclear how this would work in practice. It would raise all sorts of legal issues, I think, and legal challenges most likely. And then it raises the question of whether they are even trained and have the skills to be able to do something like that.
And maybe expand on that. The National Guard is trained for very specific missions. It's not, beat cop law enforcement. How significant would their training have to change if they were to take on a role like this?
Ryan, I think it would be a very big training mission there. I think that would be a very big hill to climb. And yes, there are military police units in the National Guard, but they have very kind of narrow types of tasks, running a vehicle checkpoint perhaps, but they're not trained and they don't have the experience of a policeman on the beat, right, who knows what it means, what constitutes sufficient evidence, trying to collect that evidence, knows what would stand up in court, how to handle the chain of custody. There's quite a bit of training in police work that a National Guardsman just simply doesn't receive. So it raises a whole practical question here. And then, of course, it again invites this criticism and these questions being asked is, what is really behind this? Is this really about law enforcement and crime, or is it a political agenda?
Okay, Dan Luce, thank you for that. We have talked about how Chicago could be the next city in the president's crosshairs. Let's go to Chicago now, where Shaquille Brewster is standing by. You just spoke with Governor Pritzker, who seems to have been getting a lot of attention from the president over the past 24 hours. What did the governor tell you?
Yeah. Well, his main message, both in my conversation and right behind me, is that there is no emergency here in Chicago that would warrant the use of the National Guard. And I think there's a second point to that, is that if there is that justification used, there will be legal pushback that he will file. And that's part of what's going on behind me. You see the governor just took the stage behind me. He has community leaders behind him, also the Attorney General of Illinois, and then I also see the mayor of Chicago. It's a show of force, so to speak. But look at the backdrop to his remarks. It's downtown Chicago. The governor trying to make the picture and paint the picture that there is no act of rebellion here. There's no emergency here. In fact, to come to this press conference, he took a boat that passed right in front of Trump Tower along the river and then went on a walk through a Chicago neighborhood to get here. That is where I caught up with him and asked him, yes, we know that crime is dropping in the city of Chicago, but is there a possibility that there could be more improvement? I want you to listen to a little bit of our conversation. Could the National Guard in any way help continue that trend that we're seeing with crime numbers?
Look, remember that National Guard are trained extraordinarily well, I might add, to go to war. And they're terrific. I mean, these are the men and women who live in our state, our National Guard are. They are often police officers and first responders who also are National Guard, because remember, National Guard are part-time. They do tremendous work, but we don't call them in unless there is truly an emergency. And there is not one. One of the reasons that we're standing right here is you can see that this city is actually operating extraordinarily well and in a much better position from a crime perspective than it was 4 years ago.
And a point that you hear from both the governor of Illinois and the mayor of Chicago is that there's a belief if the National Guard is brought in, if there's then that pushback, that firestorm on the ground, the protests that then usually come from a deployment like that, that could undermine the progress that you've been seeing in Chicago, which, yes, there are still significant issues. There is still crime here, but the trend line, especially compared to those pandemic highs, is going in the right direction, right?
Yeah, and Shaq, it's one thing for a politician to tell us that everything is okay, but I'd be interested to hear from the people that actually live there. I mean, this is where you live. I mean, how are the Chicago residents reacting to the possibility that they could see National Guard troops on their streets?
Yeah, look, there's a little bit of nuance here because you talk to people. You look at this past weekend, Ryan, for example. We know that there were more than 4 people killed in shootings, more than 27 people injured in shootings. No one's celebrating those numbers, even if they're lower than what they are in the past. People want to feel safe in their own communities. But what you continue to hear from residents is that this is a power play, they believe, from President Trump. This is him trying to exert his influence on a city that he has targeted before, going back to his first term when he threatened to send in the troops to Chicago. So you're hearing that pushback from members of the community, but I think if there's one warning, I talked to an activist group, one that led some of the bigger scale protests here in Chicago over the course of the summer. There's some hesitation before they go out with these massive protests now because they don't want to provide essentially a reason for President Trump then to come in and federalize the National Guard. They're watching, they're waiting. They disagree with possible deployment, but that doesn't mean they're satisfied and think everything's perfect right now, Ryan.
I think, yeah, nuance, the key word in all of this. Shaq, thank you so much for that great reporting on the ground.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.